And so what we have to do, the first thing we have to do is we have to somehow get into that self-talk where the value that we have is worth it. And we have to go through the qualification stage with whomever is out there that are looking for work. We're looking for a certain criteria. Like you said, what are the top four things, three things you're looking for? That value brings us into a confident interview. Otherwise, we're desperate to take the very next thing that's offered to us.
Welcome to Play It by Your Rules, the podcast for those tired of living by somebody else's script and ready to live and lead on their terms. I'm your host, Maggie Rombach, coach, speaker, and strategist. I'm here to spark a little rebel energy and leave you with a sense of possibility. Each episode, I'll talk to leaders, adventurers, experts, and changemakers who found their way. Some loud and bold, others quiet and intentional. You'll walk away with fresh insights, inspiration, and practical tools to chart your next chapter. If you're craving more freedom, flow, and fun, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. So, welcome to Play It by Your Rules, your podcast where I'm calling for mindful rebellion and encourage listeners to find their voice, claim their space, set better boundaries. And today we're diving into a topic that for many of us is a really challenging one. We'll be talking about selling and even worse, so selling ourselves. So this might be something that many of are not very comfortable with. And I'm delighted to have a sales pro with us today, Curt. And you tell me if I pronounce the name properly. So yes, maybe Curt, just introduce yourself. Who are you? What's your mission?
You bet. Maggie, thank you so much. Curt here in Houston, Texas. And I guess I would say that my background is in sales and sales management and sales training. I've done that for over 30 years. And my mission is really to help people get better at this game of selling because sales is what every one of us does. Whether we're trying to sell our partner or our spouse on a location for vacation, whether we're trying to have a conversation with our kids, trying to sell them on what they need to do, it's everywhere. The sales game is everywhere.
Wow, I had thought about selling myself in an interview, but you're absolutely right. I also have to sell my next holiday to my partner and get my kids to what I want to do. So, what's the secret ingredient to do that better?
Wow. The secret ingredients, Maggie, in sales is really listening to the other person, trying to understand them, and trying to understand that in sales, there's got to be a problem that has or a challenge. So there's an issue, there's the actions we take, and then there's the impact. So the issue or the challenge is where do we want to go on vacation? What do I want my child to do? What do I want my partner to do? How do I sell myself at a networking event? The action steps are the things we can do to listen, to ask, to probe. And the impact is our ability to ask better questions so that we can make recommendations. I recommend this, but my professional recommendation is in selling is really the art of problem solving at the end of the day, technical problem solving.
I love that, the art of problem solving. I also like how you start that really big, the issue, the action, the impact. Because, when I hear selling, and many people might do so, you just think like you knock at the door and you try to sell your cookies. And then you go like, I don't want to knock at the door and sell my cookies. But you're right, it's much bigger than that.
The whole area, the art of selling is discovery, discovering if there's even a need for the product or the service that I'm representing. And I think the challenge is we knock on doors, we make phone calls, and we immediately try to sell. Hey, Maggie, this is Curt, and I'm here, and I want to sell you this wonderful thing, and I really think you need it. And poor Maggie, you're just sitting there listening and going, what? And better way to do that is, hey, I know I'm interrupting, and the reason I'm calling is I've got a couple of questions to see if there's a fit between what I have and what you might need. If there is, great. If not, I'll be quickly on my way. It's very defenseless. You don't have to come to the conversation with your arms up in a defensive posture. I'm asking permission if there may be an opportunity for me to ask a few questions to see if perhaps there's a fit between what I have and what you may need. Very, very unarming, if you will.
I like that. So that's really also because you said it really starts with listening. And I'm more and more starting to get convinced that curiosity is the number one skill. You know, you talk about, or many people talk about the 4C, the 21st century skills, you know, like critical thinking, communication, curiosity, not curiosity, creativity, and another C I always forget. But for me, curiosity is really the one that is underlying all of this, right? And so I hear you say it's also important in the whole sales process, because if you're truly curious, you want to listen. Is that fair to say?
Boy, you hit it right on the head. I always say ABC, always be curious.
Mm.
And what that means is I'm putting the conversation on the other person. I'm curious about the other person. If, where they're from, the origin of their last name, how long they've been on their job. With today's technology, I can go through social media and I can find out about the person, or I can find out about the company and the curiosity of, so you guys are in this laboratory that you guys are making a polymer. I'm really curious about that. How did you get into that field? What is it about polymers that gets you excited? And again, it's all about the other person. I collect their stories. The more stories I can collect, the better I can be at curiosity and really putting the energy on them, not on me.
Because then you can also adapt whatever you might have to offer, because also you might have to offer several things so you can target what you propose after, right?
Absolutely. I can get curious about their position in the organization. I can be curious about how their company goes about making buying decisions about products or services like mine. Again, it's defenseless. I'm not selling anything. I don't even know if there's a fit between us. And the same thing can be said, Maggie, about dating. I'm just curious about you. I don't know if there's a chemistry between us. I don't know if there's a likability index. I don't even know if there's a commonality. So let's just ask some questions and see where that goes. That's so much easier than the old traditional ways of doing things. So selling, dating, networking, relationships, it's all intertwined in what you said is being curious.
I really like that. So I also checked out your website, and there you talk about art, the art and science of selling. Or I found that somewhere, maybe not on your website. So can you unpack that a little bit? What is
Sure.
the art and what is the science?
Well, I believe the art is that creative side, the artist, the artist who is crafting, who's painting, who is creating. The science of selling is truly what I would lean on, which is the behavioral styles. And that people come to the party, they're either formal or informal, they're people oriented or they're task oriented. And I'm a big believer in the DISC model of behavioral styles. So there's a science toward a sales process. I'm a big, big fan of the Brooks Group in North Carolina in their process. Investigate, meet, probe, apply, convince, tie it up. It spells impact. And it really is a process and it's scientific. I can't begin to sell you until I get to understand you. I can't begin to understand you until I get a chance to build trust and rapport. Once I build that trust and rapport, then I might ask permission to ask a bunch of questions. From there, I might come up to a point of where I can make a professional recommendation based on what I've discovered. I can respond to any objections or any questions you might have, and I can make a conversation that says, I recommend we get started and move down the road here, or thank you for your time. I don't think there's a fit between us. My product and service isn't what you need right now, but I really appreciate the time. And so there's a science to selling, which is a process. There's an art to selling, which is the curiosity, which is the creative nature. One step further, Maggie, there is the science of using a new tool called artificial intelligence, AI.
Mm.
AI is a tool that helps me craft better questions, helps me do better discovery, And then I can use that science in order to get to the art and then try to help connect those dots. Never in time have we had the opportunity to have these new tools to help us with that art or that creation or that connection.
Wow, there's so many things I want to pick up on, but maybe two to get started. Because first of all, you mentioned this process, and I'm just also thinking about my listeners. And I think because I know many, and probably myself included, are a bit timid about selling, and I'm more thinking about it also in the environment of selling yourself. I mean, in a job interview, to really convince somebody. So it would be great if I could attach whatever you have to share, like a reference to this framework in the episode in the show notes, so that people can really look up this process you just mentioned. The other bit, maybe just say a few more words about DISC. I mean, I know DISC, but listeners may not. So it helps
Sure.
you understand to see how the person ticks, right?
Absolutely. The William Marsden is the psychologist who was the creator of the DISC profile. And there's DISC and there's other different behavioral style models out there. It's a simple way of understanding what Tony Alessandra said is the platinum rule. Treat people the way they want to be treated. Now, I know there are some people who are very formal and they're very analytical, and that's a DISC profile. There are people who are very dominant and very controlling. That's a DISC profile. There are people who are extroverted and people oriented. That's a DISC profile. And then there's the more reserved, intentional, quieter person. DISC, dominant, influential, steady, and compliant. These magical tools help me to understand when I'm talking to somebody who it comes across as very controlling and very authoritative. Well, my sentences are brief. I'm coming right to the point. If I've got somebody who is very quiet and introverted and maybe needs some time to warm up, then I'm very genuine and I'm giving them lots of space to accept me, to process, and that way I'm not coming across in the wrong way. The golden rule says treat people the way you want to be treated. Well, what if the way I want to be treated is completely opposite in the way that you want to be treated? Well, we don't have a connection there. But if I know that you come across as in a certain way, I want to treat you the way you want to be treated, then I may adapt into who you are in a disc profile. And that's all part of the art of selling.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and I do encourage listeners because it's also one of the simpler tools, so it's quite intuitive. I'm really low on the one where you want to have loads of data. It's not the dominant one, the
Right.
so if you
It's the C, it's the compliant. It's very low on
oh
that
yeah,
data.
yeah, if you come with you got it. I'm very high on intuitive. So yes, you have to get me excited. If you give me too much data too early, I'm just not interested at all.
You and I share that same part of that behavioral style. We can adapt. We can get the data when it's required of us, but it's not our primary go-to. It's not the first place we go.
Absolutely. I really
And
like
and
that. Sorry, keep
and
going.
Maggie, you mentioned selling yourself like on a job interview. Well, you know your strengths and weaknesses. You know your superpower. They, the person you're trying to sell to, they don't. And so by you asking questions of the interviewer about the job, about the role, about the things that they're looking for, that's part of the discovery because what you're doing is you're about to present yourself. Here's where my strengths meet this. Here's where I can see some challenges. Here's where you said there's a gap, and here's how I can fill it. It's the beauty of selling yourself once you understand what they are looking for.
I really like that. And what came up now is when I moved from the private into the humanitarian sector, I applied for a job that required 5 years of fundraising experience. I had zero. I mean, I had almost a decade in marketing, which is very similar, but not specifically on fundraising. And as always, you have like a long shopping list of all the things they wanted to have in that job. And I actually asked that question quite late in the process. Okay, what are your top three priorities for this job? I mean, what are the top three things you absolutely need, given all that list, if you can only have three? And it turned out the three of them I could totally nail. I could confidently say, all these things you want me to do, I can do. And I still don't have 5 years fundraising experience. But I think asking that question helped both of us get clear that there's a match on the priorities. And then they still
Absolutely.
had to get clear if that's enough to give me the job, which in that case I was lucky. But yeah, so I think it helped in if you ask those probing questions, right?
If you ask those probing questions with some type of a preface, what are the top three things you're looking for in this position? Well, you now know the top three things they're looking for. Now, they may say this, this, and this, and you may follow up with how do you define this particular characteristic? And so again, you're asking questions, you're curious, you're asking them to prioritize. By then, you can then connect the dots and say, you're saying this is important. Here's my experience. You're saying this is important. Here's my track record. Never did you say that you have 5 years of fundraising. What you've said was, this is what you were looking for, and this is what I've done in my history. And that is alignment. And that alignment then takes it to the next level, which you just said you were not lucky, but you worked hard, you presented yourself properly, and you were the best candidate for the opportunity, and it fell in your lap.
Mm. And also you used the dating analogy before. And what I also often tell people I coach on job interviews is in the end it's also a dating process. It's not just them checking if they are, they have all the power and they decide whether or not they give you the job. Yes, they will be the one deciding whether or not they give you the job, but you'll be deciding whether or not you want the job. It goes both ways, right?
Absolutely, Maggie, it does because part of what we do in selling in that qualifying stage or in that discovery stage is we're finding out, is this a person that I want to do business with? I don't want to be so desperate that I'll take in any business. I don't want to be so desperate that I'll take in anybody in a dating environment. I want to qualify them because I may be faced with somebody who is a price shopper, someone who only looks for price, not quality. Well, my product or my service is sold on quality. So if you're looking for a watch and your budget is for a Timex that you could buy at the supermarket, and I sell high luxury Rolexes, we don't have a fit. That's okay. I qualified you out of my pool. And in a dating situation, you can ask some questions and that person is really into certain things that you are not. You can say, "Hey, that's great. This is just not a fit." It takes so much self-confidence and awareness that you're grounded in the fact that you are quality, your product is quality, your value is quality, and you bring all that into the equation, and then you're always curious when you're asking the questions.
And you just used the same term several times, and I think it's the specialist term, but I just want to draw the attention to it. You mentioned discovery, and I think by calling the beginning of this process discovery, it really helps already reframe in our head what we're actually doing, because we're only discovering, we're not selling yet. So that
Absolutely.
helps, right?
Well, there's a cliche in sales. A prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. And what that means is if I'm selling before I'm discovering, well, what is it that I'm selling? I haven't even, again, in the dating situation, I'm selling myself before that person is even qualified to want to be with me. I'm not saying I'm arrogant or I'm confident. I'm just saying there's a life conversation that has to take place if this is dating. Now, if it's just two people that want to get together to pair up to go skiing, that's a different story. We're just skiing. We have to now qualify the level of skier that you are. If I'm a black diamond skier and you're a bunny slopes, well, I don't think I want to do this. It's just not qualified because we're going to have a bad experience. And again, everything has to happen with the discovery first, or that's the whole key is that discovery.
So let's bring it back to the link to the job search because, when we pre-discussed, I explained a bit, I'm based in Switzerland. There are many layoffs, particularly in the humanitarian development sector, but not only, also private is, there are many people laid off. There's just a really rough market right now. So many people are in that position that they are looking at having to sell themselves and they don't like to sell themselves. So we already touched on a few things. But do you have like one or two reframing mindset things where people can get started on top of discovery and curiosity to
Yes.
to not stop themselves because they're so intimidated?
Depending, whether it's Switzerland or the Americas or Canada or anywhere in the world, when we're faced in a situation where there's a perceived weakness in the job market, what we tend to do is we tend to internalize and devalue ourselves. And in that devaluation, well, we're now basically selling on price. And so what we have to do, the first thing we have to do is we have to somehow get into that self-talk where the value that we have is worth it. And we have to go through the qualification stage with whomever is out there that are looking for work. We're looking for a certain criteria. Like you said, what are the top four things, three things you're looking for? That value brings us into a confident interview. Otherwise, we're desperate to take the very next thing that's offered to us. And it's going to be great for the first 90 days because it gets us into employment. But is it really great? Did we really accomplish what we were trying to accomplish? And so it's it's easy for me to say it to you, Meggie. It's easy for your listeners to hear it and they're just shaking their head going, but you don't understand. No, I don't understand. I don't know the shoes that you are walking in. I know that there is value. And I know that in my 30 years of sales and sales training, it all starts with, do you value yourself? Do you value your product? Do you value your service enough to be able to compete on that? Now, there'll always be a cheaper product out there. Here in America, we have a $5 store, we have a $1 store, and now there's a company that's the 99-cent store. There's always valuing the cheapness of the product. You are the product. You are the service. And if there's any way that you could value yourself, the first recommendation is you surround yourself with a band of brothers or a band of sisters who can hold you accountable, who you can sharpen yourself against to make sure that that value that you have stays true, stays strong in this season of job uncertainty.
This is so deep and it so resonates because, I think when you lose your job, the tendency might be to just as quickly as possible want to have the next job, also depending on how much you can afford to be off work. Or what I do see, and I see that particularly with colleagues, ex-colleagues that come out of a really rough patch, a lot of uncertainty, and their confidence is really shaken. So some of them, and I include myself, I spent the last year rebuilding my confidence. It does require, hopefully not a whole year, but it requires some time to really pause and allow yourself to get through all the steps of change, mourn what happened, be angry, be frustrated, be sad, be whatever you need to be, and then allow yourself to slowly build up that confidence and that value again. Because that really resonates. If you just rush into the next job interview and you're not even convinced yourself yet, how can you convince somebody else?
Exactly. And there is evil in the job market, meaning we who are the employers looking for that person, we know that in that type of a market, we could get the better candidate at a lower price. And that's not fair. That's short-sighted because that good candidate eventually will realize their value is worth more than what they're currently doing for you, and they'll move on. And then it'll be a turnover situation. But you absolutely hit it, Maggie, when you said that you've got to go through the mourning process you've got to go through that despair and that doubt and that anger so that when you come out the other side, you have hope. And I would say if you have a band of brothers or sisters, people who can surround you, then that grieving process will be shorter and that recovery will be stronger because you'll have those people around you who can encourage you. You want to make sure you surround yourself with people who can encourage you, not people who are in the same plight. And the next thing you know, everybody is holding each other down.
Absolutely. You know, so another thing that comes up. So I'm actually in my previous life, I was in marketing. So even in marketing, marketing and sales is not the same thing, right? Marketing, you make the pretty things and then you give it to the salesperson who has to do the hard job of actually selling them. So in marketing, what we work with often is also the whole idea of driving trial, let people test out things. So now I'm wondering, as I listen to you, how can people drive trial? How can people let their future employer try? Could you think of, or have you in your experience seen any examples where, I don't know, maybe through voluntary work, or what could people do to give a better taste of what they're like in a hiring process?
Well, if you're faced in a situation where you are out of that work, you mentioned volunteering. Anytime that volunteering, that shows activity, that shows creativeness with your brain. You're doing things whilst you're looking for the next opportunity. That adds value to what you're doing. I have, the way you said it, it reminds me when I graduated college. I wanted to work for a specific company. And so I went there and I said, I am willing to work for free 2 days a week as I learn your product and service. And then when it's time for you to make your hiring decision, you've already trained me for free. Now, the employer was very, very shocked that I would be willing to do that. And he couldn't hire me for free, but he did make an exception and give me a small hourly wage so that I could eventually come aboard with him. And it was a wonderful experience. And it was so out of the norm that somebody would want to do that. And whether you call it an internship or a volunteering, you get the opportunity to show that employer your value, your talent, your experience, if it's a place that you really want to work. And you're doing it with a look, I'm willing to do this for free for a small amount of time so I can show you what I can do. Wow. Some employers will take you up on that because it's within their power to do that.
Yeah. So I really think these days people have to somehow get creative, and find different ways. And maybe not everybody can afford to work for free, but maybe you can, you know, invent other ways to be of value. Because also, I think the other positive effect of this is by experience that place and getting to know it better, then and understanding better how we actually do fit in, that also builds then confidence, and then you can see your own value more. It also has a clear benefit for yourself. It's not just free work, it's also benefiting yourself and your self-esteem.
Exactly. That's great. And that creativity comes from that band of brothers or sisters that can help you hold yourself accountable because I think when a lot of minds come together and you start pondering, you start bouncing ideas off of each other, something new can come up. And, maybe it's not for you. Maybe somebody else in the team has tried it and it's been successful. They come back, other ideas get generated, and then the networking starts.
Yeah, the sense of community. I think you're right. Nobody has to walk it all alone. It's just everybody
Agreed.
needs to find somebody to walk alongside.
Yes.
So, Curt, before we go to my favorite bit, the quite quick fire burst questions, is there anything else you could think of that in sales you would do routinely and in job hunting one would not think of? Is there any other ingredient that we haven't touched on?
A lot of it has to do with the science of selling, which is to learn as much as you can about that company, that person, that industry. The tools are out there. Before we used to go to libraries and read books and kind of get the old past history. But today, with the technology, we can be very current. And I believe that that person who is creative and armed with all of that new knowledge, has the ability to solve problems quicker than somebody who is just pitching their product without any preparation.
Absolutely. And you know, I've been through so many hiring processes in the Red Cross because, you know, the Red Cross is a really loved organization. And we get, depending on the job, literally hundreds of applications. And I've seen so many starting with, I really deeply respect your organization. I would love to work there. And, you know, I get it. I did mention that when I applied too. But I want to make sure you can get the job done. And I want to understand how you can help me sort out my problems. So now what I try to tell people, really put yourself into the shoes of the hiring manager and think about it. And as you say, do all your research, look at the strategy, understand what the organization is struggling with. It's again comes back to curiosity, right? To really understand what do they actually need, because then you can say, and by the way, because of this experience, I can help you sort this out. And that's
Yes.
just so much more powerful than I love your organization.
Yes. Well said.
Cool. Yeah, I'm learning so much as every time. Thanks for sharing all your wisdom. So now we do the quick fire burst. It's like a little game. I'll be shooting questions at you, and I challenge you to answer with one word, maybe two.
Okay, one word.
Ready to go?
Ready to go.
Excellent. Could you share one belief you had to drop to live your way?
Inadequacy.
A place that cracked something open in you.
Roatan, Honduras.
Nice. One thing you had to unlearn.
I don't have to do it alone. Too many words.
Perfect. One idea. You're non-negotiable right now.
Faith.
The boldest risk that paid off. You can
Marriage.
do two words. Marriage. Wow. Yes. Yeah. I'm not married, but happily non-married. Still in a happy couple. But that's still the same risk, really, you know. One word for your leadership or your life in this chapter.
Vision.
Mm. The ripple you hope your story creates.
Encouragement.
Nice. Fantastic. Thanks for playing along. You
Woo!
switched on your D style, you know, like in the disc model, you know, like one answer, you can do that.
Yes. Woo! That was good. That was great, Maggie. Thank you.
Yeah. And honestly, encouragement, I know you're like training salespeople. I think you should be training shop into, you know, there's so much you have to share that I think any relationship, as you say, in every relationship, that's valuable to learn and pay attention to.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Wonderful. So, as we're closing this out, and for anybody listening who's now intrigued and all ready to be curious, to have discoveries, is the one very first practical step where you would suggest they get started tomorrow?
I would say the first practical step to get started tomorrow is to craft 8 curiosity-based questions you could ask another person to allow them to expand. It
I
doesn't
like that.
have to necessarily be salesy, but it can be about the other person. And as they share, you'll learn how to do follow-up questions. You'll say, wow, that's interesting. Tell me more. Or when you say that, what do you mean by? Or tell me a little bit about. Or there must be a story behind. And that allows the other person to open up.
Why eight?
It's just a number I came up. 10 is common, 5 is short, so I said 8.
I like eight because that's a lot, right? I mean, when you
Yes.
think of it, because then you have to think more than, hey, tell me about your job and your hobby. You know, you really, I mean, if you
Yeah.
want to have eight meaningful questions, that's quite a bit of work, I
Well,
would think.
if you think of forum, FORM, family, occupation, recreation, motivation. Well, you can ask two questions on family, two on occupation, two on recreation, two on motivation. And so there's your eight.
I like that. I'll give it a shot myself. That's
Thank
an
you.
excellent idea. Thanks so much, Curt. It was a real pleasure. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. And yes, have a lovely day.
Maggie, you too. And thank you so much for being a guest on your podcast. You are a phenomenal host. I appreciate how you prepared for this and how you really drew me into the conversation.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's it for today. If this stirred something in you, don't just sit on it. Do something, anything, today, right now. Take one small intentional step toward more freedom, flow, and fun. And see where the ride takes you. If this hit home, follow the show, share it with a friend, or leave a review. That's how we ripple this energy further. Want to go deeper? Head over to mindset/mastery.ch for coaching, tools, and next steps. Until next time, trust your gut, stay curious, and keep playing it by your rules. Bye for now.